Major phone carriers make you sign contracts with rigid data plans to trap you into a kind of forced phonogamy. Sounds pretty insecure if you ask me. At Consumer Cellular, we believe in a more consensual and healthy form of phonogamy, free of contracts and more flexible to your data needs. This way, you stick around not because we force you to with contracts and fees, but because you love our phone plans. Like ardently love our phone plans. Phonogamously. Consumer Cellular. When freedom calls, we're here to answer. Call us at 1-888-FREEDOM.
Hello and welcome to The Price of Football, the show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game and is very much looking forward to finding out what the bloody hell non-fungible means. I'm Kevin Day, he's Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire, and Kieran, I hear you'll be actually at Liverpool University soon.
Yes. Term starts, so I'm looking forward to doing some face-to-face teaching, having done it via Zoom for 18 months, where you start off with half the people have got their pictures on Zoom, and then by sort of 20 minutes later, you're down to 5%. And I know I'm competing with Instagram and Angry Birds, and I'm pretty much onto a loser there.
Yes, well, we'll be talking about your Zoom photograph later on in our interview. But, it's nice to know that the old home in Sussex will be a little quieter without spreadsheets rustling and Susie and the Banshees blaring out of the speakers. It'll just be the gentle sound of corks being popped and Finley gnawing on a wonky chomp.
Absolutely.
Now, later in the show, we will hear from Steve Shipman of the Oldham Athletic fan group Push the Boundary. But it's Newsday, Kieran. There's not much news today, but most of it is a little bit weird.
Yes.
And the first story is not that weird, to be perfectly honest. The weirdness comes afterwards. But the South American Football Confederation has joined UEFA in opposing the idea of a World Cup every 2 years.
Yeah, this is very strange because in 2018, CONMEBOL, which is the South African Confederation, said they were keen to promote a FIFA World Cup every 2 years, and now they've joined up with UEFA, and what they've said is that there's no sporting justification in holding the tournaments so frequently. UEFA, Alexander Severin, who is the head of UEFA, is threatening a boycott if it moves to this. And Jurgen Klopp, I think, has summed it up in. I think he reads my tweets. He says, "In the end, it's all about money. That's how it is." And I think he's exactly right. FIFA are jealous of the amount of money that UEFA generates from both the Champions League and the European Championships. And FIFA only generates money once every 4 years. So by doubling the number of tournaments, you double the amount of cash as far as they're concerned. And they've got the support of the African Confederation, the Asian Confederation, the Caribbean Confederation, and so on. So now it's going to come down to a vote. And I think you need a 2/3 majority in order to put through something of this significance. But it's going to be pretty much borderline. I think FIFA has 211 countries who are affiliated to it, each of whom get an annual payout from FIFA, which is linked to FIFA's financial success. So, if I was the Cook Islands or Nicaragua or Nepal, you can see why these local associations or local domestic associations are in favour of a World Cup every 2 years, because it means more money for them. And Jurgen Klopp's exactly right. But it's not just money; it's also power, control, and politics, which were, of course, the driving forces behind Project Big Picture and the Super League franchise.
It's a good job we know, Kieran, that every football association within FIFA will take the money they get and distribute it fairly around football in their country. We can rest assured, safe in that knowledge. Now, I said South America, you said South Africa, so already the BAFTA's gone for this.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I meant to say South America. Yeah,
they go South America. Fine, okay. This is make a note. Yet another one we shouldn't send to the BAFTA committee. Now, this I'm going to have to take your word for this. That this is an actual thing, Kieran, because Guy hasn't convinced me. It says here that La Liga is about to start selling non-fungible tokens. It's now my favourite word. So, sorry, darling, it's non-fungible. I also like the fact producer guy wrote it in his email as NFT, and he forgets I'm arts. So I assumed he was talking about some sort of series of football documentaries at the National Film Theatre. No, it's non-fungible tokens. So does that mean there are fungible tokens, Kieran? Or is that money?
Fungible is sort of has some sort of reality to them. So these things, it's effectively the same as Panini cards without the card.
Oh,
so
hang on a second.
And it is as daft as it sounds. But what you need is, if you find enough gullible people around, you can sell them the equivalent of magic beans, in the sense that you say, I'm going to give you ownership of a Cristiano Ronaldo Panini card, or the equivalent of, and there's only one of them around, and we're going to agree that you own it, and everybody else is going to agree that you own it. And whilst there's enough people believing that you own this Cristiano Ronaldo card, it has some value, because in theory you can sell it to somebody else. So that's the basis behind these. And you will be able to trade them. You will be able to buy and sell them. There will be a market. This sort of brings up memories of Football Index to me, in the sense that they're trying to create a market for something which doesn't physically exist. But if the football authorities buy into it, and some of the footballers, they're giving their names to it as well, then people start to believe in it. And I've always taken the sort of, my concerns always, but sort of the Goebbels belief that if you tell a lie enough, it then becomes the truth. And if people believe that these NFTs, and all that you will get is you got an email which says you now own the online version of Cristiano Ronaldo, or other players exist, of course, Messi and Wilfried Zaha and so on, and you'll be able to do this and claim ownership. But people say, well, hold on, what exactly have you got? You paid a lot of money for the equivalent of an email.
You do realise you've put an idea into producer guy's head here: invisible merchandise. It's like 15 quid for an invisible T-shirt. No, I sent it. Did you not get an envelope? I got an envelope, but there was no T-shirt in it. Yeah, it's invisible.
It's non-fungible. It's inside. You haven't looked hard enough.
It's not. So fungible is tangible, essentially. Then is it the same?
Yeah. Fungible is. They try to make it. It's unique. Something which is fungible is if I've got 2 cans of baked beans, they're effectively what are called fungible assets, in the sense that they both contain baked beans, and as far as everybody else is concerned, those beans are identical to one another. A non-fungible means that it is a unique token that you are buying, so it's a bit like a unique Panini card.
Well, it's like Dr. Nick in The Simpsons, isn't it? Inflammable means flammable. What a country. Another weird one, Kieran. It's been revealed that Neymar is being paid €500,000 a month not to talk about religion.
Yes, this is quite spectacular, really. I found this, and I kid you not, through reading a copy of Premier Christian News. And they brought to my attention the ethical clause in Neymar's contract, which is worth around about €6 million a year, whereby he will get a bonus provided he does not make political or religious propaganda that could damage the image and unity of the club. And he also has to be courteous, punctual, friendly, and available to fans. Now, if producer Guy wants to give us £6 million a year to be courteous, punctual, friendly, and available to fans, I think we need to get your agent to start negotiations with him.
Well, we've been throwing it away for nothing, Kieran. We've been courteous and available for zilch. We've really missed a trick there. It's a strange one, because I checked the clause when you told me about it, and it makes, must be polite about cultural reference. I mean, these are all things that you'd expect people to be, but it's an interesting one, because he is he is very religious. He's a committed Christian, and he has been seen quite often in the past with Christian messages on T-shirts. So it's an odd. I'm slightly ambivalent about this. I mean, like you said, I'd love to be paid €500,000 a month not to talk about religion, but I would like to have been at the discussion with his. I suppose the €500,000 is the important part of that conversation, isn't it? But
yes.
you would guess he's not the only player being asked to sign clauses like this.
Yes, and remember, it's also got the word political about it. So,
yes.
You know, if he came out and said that he is unhappy with the awarding of the 2022 World Cup to Qatar, then you could see that might cause issues at PSG. Or so, you know, clubs are always trying to build up positive relationships. We are living in an era of cancel culture. So if he says something which was anti-religion, then you've got all of the 40 to 50% of the US is sort of Christian evangelists. And they tend to be quite sensitive about things. So it's very easy to disenfranchise people who are from the permanently offended school of thought, of which there are more and more of them. But what I really did like reading Premier Christian News is at the bottom of the article, there was a prayer that we could say together, and I'm not, I'm not being facetious here. There was a prayer for Neymar, and you could like that prayer as well, and it had 253 likes when I last looked. So it clearly is it's a website which takes its views seriously, and as an atheist, My view is in all things is just respect other people's views, but it certainly is a strange. It's a strange clause.
Yeah, it sounds like Finley the dog is praying for wonky chomps as we speak.
Yes,
and you imagine the Kieran if you and I were permanently offended. I mean, we've got a right to be with some of the emails we get sent, but just shrug it off, really. Now, this story is not only weird, Kieran, but also annoying. Was it a yawn?
It was Finley.
Has he had a busy morning?
Yes. He's been licking his non-testicles and he's got bored.
You would, Kieran.
Yes.
You would. UEFA have banned Ajax from wearing a Bob Marley inspired kit. I'm really sad about this story, Kieran.
Yeah, this is. It was such a wonderful story when it came out. So. A few years ago, Ajax were playing at, I think it was an away friendly or something, and somebody put Three Little Birds by Bob Marley on the tannoy before the match started, and everybody started singing it as these things have a habit of doing. And then it sort of became adopted by a section of the Ajax fan base, and as a homage to a great man. They came up with an agreement with Adidas that on what's referred to under Article 7, paragraph 1901 of the FIFA rulebook as the collar zone, i.e., that little bit at the back of your collar, they were going to put three little birds in red, yellow, and green, or one colour to me, and that was it, and. You would have thought, and they announced this, and everybody thought it was a great idea, and it sold four times as many units as any other Adidas Ajax kit. So, Adidas are happy, Ajax are happy, the people who are buying it are happy because they've got this very tenuous association between Bob Marley and the football club, and also it's a great looking shirt. It has to be said. And then the completely humorless, po-faced people at UEFA said, well, you can't do that because the collar zone can only have a manufacturer's logo or a sponsor's advertisement. So those are the areas which can be formally at the back of the shirt, at the collar zone. So therefore, when Ajax play in UEFA competitions, they have to have a specially made kit which doesn't contain the three little birds. But I believe that the retail version, because it's flying off the shelves, made by Adidas, still has those.
Well, the sensible thing for Ajax to do would be just to start a company called Three Little Birds and say they're sponsoring them. Can they do that? Would that?
Yeah, that would work. Yeah.
I've inadvertently had a sensible business idea. I remember seeing Bob Marley at the Crystal Palace Bowl, and just as the sun was setting, it was just one of the most amazing gigs I've ever been at. It's fantastic. On the subject of kits as well, Kieran, and this is our last story this week before our quite emotional interview. There will be no more green kits in Serie A, and this is obviously of great interest to you.
Yes. It was initially sold, or tenuously sold, as being linked to colourblind people not being able to distinguish a green kit against a green grass. But I'm thinking, hold on, well, first of all, I see a different world to the rest of the planet.
To be fair, Kieran, that's not just because of the colour blindness.
Yes. But I'd imagine you, as having full colour vision, you also see green on green, and it probably hasn't made much of a difference. So we sort of dug a little bit deeper into this, and apparently it's more to do with that green was causing problems in respect of those moving adverts which go round the side of pitches when the TV cameras were on it, because it was causing some form of blur with the green and the advertising hoardings. So, as always, it comes down to money. The advertisers weren't happy.
Right.
If a fan's unhappy about something, we'll just whinge on a podcast or on social media, and nothing gets done. As soon as the sponsors start, the advertisers start complaining, something gets done straight away. So from 22-23, if you have a mainly green kit, it will be outlawed. I think there's one club that has green and black stripes, but the Italian football authorities have decreed that is mainly black, so that will be acceptable. But there's much broader issues in respect of colour blindness. For anybody that was watching the Manchester United match last night, you could not make out the numbers of the the numbers of the players' shirts because of the way that the broad tone, and it's a tonal issue when you're colourblind, was very similar to that of the shirts themselves. And for most people, their colour blindness experience in life was at the age of 6 at school, somebody shows you half a dozen cards with numbers on, and if you can read the numbers, you're fine. And if you can't read the numbers, you are deemed to be colourblind. And certainly that was the case with me. And I remember going home in tears that day because the woman who'd done this said that you do realise this, you'll never be able to be a train driver, which was my ambition in life at the age of 6, and rightly so. And that was that. So the problem with colour blindness is much broader. But unfortunately, now we are living in an era where club football kits are predominantly to do with raising money and far less to do with being able to distinguish one club from another. I think that money will be driving this, although some progress is being made.
I have to be honest, Kieran, I've been rather surprised by the amount of correspondence we had since you first mentioned colour blindness. And again, I'll be perfectly honest, it's not an issue that occupied much of my mind before knowing you. And it's not an issue that I realised had financial implications as well, because there are many, many, many colourblind football fans who are paying the same amount of money that I am to watch football on BT or on Sky, and they're not getting the same experience. So this is an issue that we're going to explore further next week when we talk to Catherine Albany Ward, who's the founder of Colourblind Awareness, who I'm told, Kieran, is quite feisty.
She's brilliant, Catherine. I've had chats with Catherine. She stands up for the cause superbly.
Good. Interview time. We've joked in months gone by about how often we mentioned Derby County and Sheffield Wednesday. Sadly, in recent weeks, we've talked just as much about Oldham Athletic, and that's never a good sign, I'm afraid. So we spoke to Steve Shipman from Push the Boundary for a chat about life at Boundary Park. Steve, thank you so much for talking to us. It's lovely to talk to you, except it's not really, because we only talk to people when their club's in trouble, unfortunately.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, thanks for having us, and thanks for highlighting the plight that we're going through.
Yeah, before we talk about that trouble, Steve, just tell us a little bit about your club and how long you've supported them.
I started to support them in around probably the late 80s. So I've got vague memories of the kind of the pinch me season in 89-90, and I followed the season that we actually went up. My first ever game was actually was Roger Palmer's testimonial, which was the last game that the Chadian was all standing as well. So I was on my dad's shoulders on the under the floodlights, and we beat City 3-2, and that was the game to sort of celebrate obviously his time at the club and promotion. So literally, I joined at the very, very peak. I think since then it's just been downhill, to be honest. gradually downhill, but that's escalated in the last few years.
You've probably got vague memories of relegating us from the Premier League then, when you had to win all three of your last games and we had to get a point, and you did yours and we didn't do ours.
Yeah, that was a hell of a week.
Yeah,
to be honest, three wins in a week was unbelievable. Yeah.
Well, it was partly our team's fault for doing a lap of honour before you played any of those three games, which the Palace fans let them know in no uncertain terms. Now, listen, Steve, in the opening paragraph of Push the Boundaries mission statement, you say that fans of this club have for far too long been ignored and treated with contempt by the owners of the club. For some of our listeners worldwide, just remind us who those owners are and how this situation has come to this.
I mean, technically, there's one owner. So, the guy whose name's on the door is Abdallah Lemsagam. But he sort of works in collaboration with his brother, Mohammed Lemsagam. And they've been in situ since they took over the club at the end of January in 2018. Yeah.
And how did the relationship begin, and how has it deteriorated so badly?
I mean, when they came in, there were rumours that there was a sale going through, and that was probably coming through around towards the probably at September, October time of 2017, so at the start of the season. So they were kind of making decisions behind the scenes as the sale was going through, and there was the odd sort of rumble of staff members leaving. And I think a lot of that was attributed to the fact that maybe, he was just getting his own people in and maybe he's clearing out some of the people from the old regime, which, you sort of give a bit of leeway for that. And then there was a game against Blackpool when we lost the game 2-1. We started the season poorly under John Sheridan. And he only named, I think he named 3 or 4 substitutes. And the rumour was that was because it was he was standing his ground against the number of trialists that were coming through the door. Substandard trialists that hadn't been approved by the manager. And lo and behold, I think a few games later, John Sheridan sort of left by mutual consent, and we got Richie Wellens in. So that was kind of when we started to see things. I think it probably escalated when we got to the end of the 17-18 season, when we got relegated against Northampton, and we'd had an ever-present player called Usman Fain, who was a central midfielder, and for the last 2 games he was left out of the squad. And I think there was an article that was done in, I think it was May or June 2018, by a journalist that follows Oldham, and he was basically said that he'd had a falling out with the chairman in the dressing room after one of the league games, and he was never to be seen again. He'd left the club, and that was that. And we got relegated. So it was then that the rumours of interference started started to raise their head, really.
Right. Do the Supporters Trust still own 3%?
Yeah, the Supporters Trust and now the foundation, they own 3%. That was gifted to the club back in 2004 when we came out of administration. So they are, they've still got 3%. They're non-voting shares, right. So they're B shares in the football club. Yeah.
And is it right that in the deal in which he bought the club, that didn't include the North Stand? Because I'm aware of situations like my own club, Palace, where we didn't own the freehold of the whole ground, but that's a strange situation if you don't own one stand.
Well, we don't own the ground, but I guess the situation with that is, and there's a lot of misconceptions about this. We've not owned the stadium since 1999, so we've rented it for a considerable amount of time. What happened was we tried to move grounds in around 2008. So we bought the council bought some land, and we were going to redevelop on that land. But it turns out that there was I think there was a war memorial on there or something. So we couldn't build on it. So as a result, the council sort of held their hands up and said, "Well, we've messed up here. We will buy the land back off you, and we'll give you some money to redevelop Boundary Park." So that took place, and that's how we've ended up with the one new stand that we've got, the North Stand. And yeah, the current incumbent chairman is responsible for the rent on that. So effectively, we rent it's rented back to the club on a match day, but every other time it's owned by somebody else.
Can I just bring Kieran? Can I just bring you in on that, because it's very difficult. I mean, you're losing a lot of match day income for a start off when a lot of it's going on rent, and it's very difficult to move the ground forward when you don't own it, isn't it?
Yes, if you take a look at other clubs who are renting the ground, especially under the terms of many of the rental agreements, they've not got a lot of power. I know it's on a different scale, but part of the beef that West Ham fans have is that since moving to the London Stadium, they've been unable to push things through as quickly as they'd like, and that's caused a lot of resentment. There's ways of, it's a horrible word, but it's a necessary word these days. There's ways of monetizing a stadium if you own it. Turning it into a 365-day facility, use of conference, and the fans tend to buy into that because they see it as being their stadium as opposed to just a revenue earner for somebody else.
Thanks, Gail. I was slightly distracted there, Steve, because we're doing this on Zoom for technical reasons, and the picture of Kieran that comes up is him in a full Brighton kit, doing the complete John Terry by the look of it.
I'm not selling tickets to show people around the ground.
You look like you're looking up and about to hit a 30-yard pass, Kieran. You look like the first 2 yards are in the head. You've reached that stage of your career where the first 2 yards are in your head. Steve, Abdallah Lamsagam seems determined to ramp up tension with the fans. He's responded very badly to the peaceful protests that have been going on. He's tried to stop some of them getting into home games and the away game or him. Why do you think he's doing this? Because his open letter, perhaps you can tell us about that as well, because that ramped up tensions even further. What's his position? Why won't he communicate with you? What's the problem in general? We've as a group, we've tried to engage with the club for around 18 months now. So we're trying to get them to the table to say, let's talk about these issues. We're raising red flags, whether it's, winding up petitions, whether it's unpaid tax bills, whether it's reports of late wages or turnover of managers. And they've always upheld us as in us as a group and us as in the supporters at arm's length. And he just doesn't seem to want to address or take any responsibility for any of the mistakes that have been made in that time. And I think up until very recently, before these protests started, he was insistent that the people that have got an issue with the way that he's running the club are a minority. And I think that it's obviously clear to everyone now that isn't the case. I think he's having met him on a couple of occasions. He's very much a person that he
he doesn't take criticism well. Let's put it that way. So I think when he is backed into a corner, as he has been in the last few weeks, he will retaliate. And even his, you touched on his open letter. Even his open letter is kind of a. He sort of started off by saying, this isn't really my doing. We know you're not happy. But then he's sort of gone into that middle part of the sandwich. I won't say what sort of sandwich, but he's gone into the middle and said, well, these are the mistakes that we've made. And then at the end of it, he's kind of gone back to saying, well, but it's the fans that are hurting the club. So even in his admission of guilt, it wasn't really that much of an admission of guilt. It's more kind of, this is on you rather than on me.
I worry for you, Steve, because I'm trying to find a way of saying this that won't get producer guy twitchy about legal issues, but he seems to me as an outsider to be a man who's running the club into the ground. I mean, he seems to be doing this deliberately. I mean, that's the worry, and that must be the worry for Oldham fans, isn't it?
But he's always come out and said that he loves the club and he fell in love with the club and he wants it to succeed. But with his actions, he makes some. I mean, I admit that football's emotive, but he makes some terrible decisions when it comes to the actual running of the football club. We touched on the North Stand before, and the reason that the club don't get any match day income is that they could do, but there's a service level agreement there that needs to be signed in order for them to do that. And he refused to sign it. So for the last 2 seasons, they've not had any money on match days. But that could be going to the club. But his stubbornness won't allow that. Right. We've had over 100 players in the last 3 years as well, and we've sold one player for profit. And part of his vision was to get players in, to sell them for profit and reinvest that money. But we've sold one player, George Edmondson, for profit, and he was a product of the youth team that was here before he turned up.
I read a report by Mike Minay of BBC Radio Manchester, which said that the Supporters Foundation seemed to be more patient with him, but you were less tolerant, pushed the boundary, were less tolerant. What did he mean by that? And in general, are the fans united?
I think, yeah. I mean, we were formed because, I guess to put it bluntly, because we didn't feel that the Trust were doing their job. They've got one sole job, and that is to stop us going into administration again. And when we were in court in March 19, even in the weeks in the build up to when we knew that we'd been served papers for lack of rent payments and a debenture that was sitting over the club, they still maintained that there wasn't really any issues and that they were happy with the way that the club was being run. And I know we've constantly been banging on their door to say, this is going to go south if we don't do something soon. And I think there's been some recent changes on the Trust. We've got new people in, and I think that's made a big difference. And so we are very much on the same page now. But I think the last sort of 18 months or so, it's been quite frustrating to get them to understand how serious the situation is.
Well, the bad news is, and again, the guy will want me to say, for some people it may be good news. The bad news is that only 3 days ago, Abdallah Lemsagar says he doesn't want to sell and hasn't received any offers to buy anyway. So he's adamant that he wants to stay at the club and turn it into whatever success is for Oldham.
Yeah, I mean, he did say that. I mean, we know that bids have been made for the club.
Okay.
We know that bids have been made for circa $1.5 million in the last 18 months or so. And we know that there's people interested in buying the club as we speak. I think it's his insistence of the asking price that he wants for it. I mean, essentially, obviously, as we touched on before, we don't own the stadium, so you're essentially buying the golden share to the Football League and a badge, and the assets in terms of the players. So essentially, a golden share and a badge. So, from our perspective, it's a case of we have to keep putting the pressure on to say, accept one of these bids, or at least consider them, because the value of the football club is not going to go up while he remains here. He bought it for considerably less than 1.5 million, and that's when we were in the lower echelons of League One. Now we're propping up the entire Football League. So He can't expect to, get a return on what he paid for it.
Is 1.5 million the asking price, or is it more than that? Do you know?
I think that's kind of what. Well, that 1.5 is obviously what people would be willing to pay. We've heard rumours that he's holding out for around 5 million.
Right. Okay. Kieran, is that a realistic value on the club?
5 million, no chance.
Right.
They'd also be inheriting the debts of the club, and as Steve says, they don't have any major assets. By the sounds of it, if the playing squad was any good, they wouldn't be propping up the rest of League Two. So there's no value there.
Yeah.
Nothing in the stadium. You are paying for the prospect of getting to a higher division at a later date, but it's tough getting out of divisions, as we know, and it's costly.
Yeah,
it's probably also worth pointing out that there was a Q&A some time ago where he valued the squad at something like 5 million. And it turns out that he'd actually admitted that he'd got those values from the website, the transfer market website.
I don't know what these people do. You should just ask Kieran. It'd be much easier, these people. Steve, sorry, mate. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday, Steve, who's a chap called Chris England. He's a playwright and author. He's been an Oldham fan for probably 2 decades longer than you. And he was telling me that you've had no trophies, no promotions for 30 years, which is longer than anyone else. Only 6 top half finishes in that time, which is the worst in the league. But he wanted me to ask you if you think that things can change without dropping out of the league.
I think that it can. I think when you actually look at the football club, there is still a hell of a lot of potential there. I think if you can create a good working relationship with the landlord, ideally get it all under one umbrella, that would be perfect. The facilities are there and the fan base is there. Oldham's a town of 250,000 people. So there should be no issues in that respect. But it won't be under his leadership. And I think it needs to happen quickly, because I think with where we are at the moment and the performances on the pitch, it's only going to go one way.
Something needs to be done. How are local authorities, MPs, are they involved? Because we can't see another club in the north. We can't see Bury, Macclesfield and Oldham all going under because of people standing by and letting it happen. So is there a wider campaign in the town against the owner?
We're trying to do that. Yeah, we actually wrote to Angela Rayner, and we've had a meeting with her. We've also had a meeting with the other local MPs, so Debbie Abram and Jim McMahon. So I think they've kind of got together and written to the club to demand answers. As far as I'm aware, they've ignored those letters. But I mean, that's a door that we will keep banging on, because as with our success in the past, if you look at other teams as well, if a team does well, then a town does well.
Yeah. There are, I think, 2 glimmers of hope. Well, more than that, I hope. There's way more than that. But 2 clubs, let's put it that way. Swindon Town are coming out of a situation similar to yours. Most of that down to the supporters. But you were away at Orient last week, and they had a really similar spell to you, didn't they? A forthright, stubborn owner, 11 managers, 2 relegations in 3 years. I think you've had 9 managers. And they came out of it. So it is possible. What do you think the outcome will be, and what is the outcome you want?
I think the outcome will be, and I'm not sure about the timescale, but I think we have to keep that pressure on to let him know that this is going to keep happening until he leaves the football club. He needs to cash in his chips and walk away, because this is not going to work. It's never going to work with the plan that he's got. And I think, if I'm being honest, whilst Abdallah owns the club, I think a lot of this is probably driven by his brother, Mohammed, who is the sporting director, who is responsible for signing these players and amazingly seems to outlast all these managers that have come to the club in I guess what is a show of amazing nepotism. And I think if he gets bored with it, then I honestly think the owner will sell, and that's what we have to keep. That's why we have to keep the pressure on.
Well, we all have to keep the pressure on, Steve. It's one of the very many clubs. Again, one of the things I was talking to Chris about, those sliding door moments. You're probably too young to remember, but the magic day of the semi-final in 1990 when Oldham played Man United and Drew Palace played Liverpool. And if you'd predicted at that time which of those teams was going to be in trouble, you'd have said Palace, because Oldham were an established team at that time. They were a Premier League team, really well run, well managed. And this is another tragic example of what happens to a club when the wrong people get hold of it. And we're in a situation where a club like Oldham, in a proud football town like Oldham, is in danger of going out of the league, and God forbid, even worse. So we're all behind you, and anything we can do in your fight to get your club back, we will happily do it.
Absolutely, thank you, and thanks for all your support so far. I think to get it on a national stage like it has been, I think is part of the battle. You don't know which potential investors are out there who would be listening and wanting to get involved. So yeah, thank you for that.
You're welcome. Good luck, Steve.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Kieran, obviously, you can hear the emotion and you can hear the worry, but luckily EFL have communicated with us about one of the issues, the recent deluge of tennis balls that were thrown onto the pitch at a game, which I thought was hilarious. I don't care what the commentator said about it being irresponsible. I thought it was very funny and a very gentle way of expressing protest, but I believe the EFL have disagreed with you saying the same thing.
Yes, I did receive communication from EFL and fair play. They are monitoring us, and it was that they advised us that a tennis ball would fall within the definition of a missile. And therefore, under I think the Football Offences Act, anybody caught throwing a tennis ball, in theory, could be brought before a criminal court and prosecuted. So I think we are duty bound to pass that on. I think that perhaps their priorities are different to ours, and again, got to respect that. We've seen recently how the use of missiles can change things. I mean, I'm not sure that the Taliban popped down to their nearest branch of JD Sports and cleared out the Kabul store of tennis balls, and that made the existing authorities run away, and along with the when the Americans left. But it's an issue, but also we're talking about the Football Offences Act. I can't remember the exact name of the act. It seems to be football orientated. If this was a different sport, there would be a more relaxed approach. And once again, football fans are effectively being highlighted as untrustworthy. I've seen some very innovative, non-violent protests historically. I think at Charlton they threw plastic rubber ducks, or rather, no, rubber ducks. In fact, you can't have a plastic rubber duck, can you? They're thinking about it, and they lobbed loads of those onto the pitch, and the aim was to highlight a cause for concern in a peaceful manner. In a manner which does contain a degree of humour, because I think as football fans, we are aware that there is a degree of prejudice against us from certain outlets, certain political viewpoints, and certain people, other stakeholders in the football industry who think we should sit down, shut up, and just take whatever they give to us.
If cricket fans threw tennis balls on a pitch at a Pigeon Test match special, would be talking about it for years. I was going to say if tennis fans threw tennis balls on that would get a bit confusing. I mean, it's the EFL are right to point that out to you, Kieran, and of course get into the hub of the matter as always. But joking aside, this is a really worrying situation. The bit that really stuck out for me was the difference in the valuation that the owner has put on the club and the valuation that you think it has, and these are ominous signs, Kieran, aren't they? There's Bury Macclesfield alarm bells ringing all over the place here, aren't there?
Yes, yeah. I mean, the Northwest has been through a really tough period. You rightly highlight Bury and Macclesfield, which no longer exist. We nearly lost Bolton. Yeah. There's been issues at Rochdale, which appear to be on the mend, but we still don't know who owns those 42% of shares. Yeah. Clearly, what happened at Wigan was a debacle as well. I think if the owner wants to make progress, sometimes you have to swallow pride, and sometimes it's ego, pride, and vanity which stop people doing the right thing. It's probably it's in his interests. We don't condone the abuse given to his brother, who's been in the director's box, who's effectively running the club on a day-to-day basis. Football is an emotional game. Sometimes, we've got to just try to keep on the right side of the line with regards to those emotions. But if you're not wanted somewhere and it's costing you money, because Oldham is still losing money all the time, then what's the point in continuing?
But also, if you're visibly affecting the emotional well-being of 5,000, 10,000, 20,000 Oldham fans around the world, as well as the economic well-being of the town, then forget your vanity and pride. Stop it. It's the football club is more important than you are. If you'd like to make a contribution to our always free-to-air podcast, then that would be very kind of you. Please go to patreon.com/Price of Football. If you have a question for our questions pod, which is on Monday, then you need to email it to questions@priceoffootball.com. And in the meantime, I shall hand you over to Mr. Kieran Maguire and his dog, Finley, for the customary farewell message.
Well, once again, folks, thanks for the feedback. We do take notice. I'd like to apologise to the listener in Egypt who thought I was deliberately mispronouncing Qatar. I'm just hopeless at pronunciation a lot of the time. And he gave us a 1-star review purely on the basis of that. So, my head is duly hung in shame. But if you want to help us financially through Patreon, it costs as little as £1 a month just to give us a little bit of support. But if you just want to help the podcast in terms of its profile and so on, if you can give us a 5-star review. It makes the business in terms of the charts, which is producer Guy's side of the business, and he tells us about it, and me and Kevin nod in agreement, though we haven't got a clue what he's talking about. But apart from that, take care, look after yourselves, and for those of you who might be going to university in the next week or two, make the most of it. It's all I can say for me. Best 3 years of my life. And have a good time.
What a lovely note to end on. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
The Price of Football. The Price of Football.